All right, guys, so here are the notes for 0.3, which is going to be about inequalities. And the first thing I want to start with is a review of interval notation. You probably saw it as a freshman. Knock on wood, you saw it as a freshman. But it is a way of expressing an answer without the inequality sign. I would copy this into your notes, like hit pause, make sure this is all down, because this will be here until the end of time. The vast majority of college professors expect interval notation. There's like 4 different notational styles that you can use. This is the easiest to deal with, and it's one of the quickest to understand symbolically. So you always use a parenthesis when it is not included or open. So that is going to be your greater than or less than signs. All right, a bracket is included. So this would be whenever you have an equals underneath. All right, we always use parentheses with positive or negative infinity, and the reason for that is infinity is a moving target. You are never going to get to infinity. You can say, oh, I'm going to infinity and beyond, but you're never going to quite get there. You're going to keep going and keep going, but that's the whole point with infinity, is that it is a constantly moving target. So it's not going to be included because infinity is a concept, not an actual number. So let's start off with some of the basics. I'll show you both on the inequality line, and I will show you the answer as interval notation. Okay. So for our first example, I've got 2 is greater than or equal to negative m plus 2m. And you're looking at this going, Mason, that's easy. Like, combine your like terms and you're basically done. You're correct. All right, so I've got 2 is less than or equal to negative m plus a positive 2m is m. Now, for a lot of students, when they go through and they're like, okay, I'm going to graph this. The problem is they're like, okay, wait a minute. 2 is greater than or equal to m, meaning 2 is going to be the largest thing you see. So I know I have to have a 2 because of this symbol right here. It's got to be a giant closed circle. All right. Now, I need m to be less than or equal to 2. So to do that, I need to go this way. Now, a lot of times students want to try and use to determine which way that arrow should be pointing. Now, the only time that works is if your variable comes first. So I'm going to write you a little note over here. Running out of room, hang on. So when it's of the form x is greater than a number or x is less than or equal to a number, the symbol really doesn't matter. X has to come first, your number has to come second. So now that we've done all of this, we need to come up with our interval notation that we're going to include. Now this goes from 2 all the way to negative infinity. Goes on and on and on forever and ever and ever. So the way I write this is negative infinity is definitely smaller than 2. So I always put my smallest number here, larger number here. Now we know anytime you're dealing with infinities, it's a parenthesis sign. Now, because this dot right here is solid, we are going to use a bracket. And that's really all there is to interval notation. You go from negative infinity to 2, it stops, but this bracket tells me that it includes 2. All right, so for our second example, we've obviously increased the number of pieces that are within our inequality. So we're going to start off by rewriting it over here. 7 times the quantity 5 minus A is greater than or equal to 2 plus 4A. So I need to start by distributing. So I have 35 minus 7A is greater than or equal to 2 plus 4A. Personal preference, I would try to get my variables on the left because then I can use that trick that I mentioned in the last problem where I can use this inequality sign to tell me which way my arrow is pointing. So to do that, I'm going to move over 4A and 4A, and I'm going to move my 35. So those cancel and these cancel. I have negative 13A is greater than or equal to negative 33. Nope. 7 minus 4 is definitely not 13. It's 11. Negative 11A. Now the reason I fixed that is because these should work out to being whole numbers. I'm not that much of a jerk where I would give you these as fractional answers. So I want to make sure that you guys get decent numbers. Now this final step, I have to divide by a negative. Anytime you divide or multiply by a negative, let me get this next problem out of the way, you have to flip your inequality sign. So I'm going to write a little note over here. Divide or multiply by a negative. You need to flip your inequality. So here's what that looks like. I now have a positive A. So A, instead of it being greater than or equal to, is now less than or equal to. And it's going to be 3. So this is my inequality notation of my solution. I need to go back up and fill in my number line. It's got to be a closed circle because it's less than or equal to. And because A comes first, it shows the arrow going to the left. And that also makes numerical sense because I want A to be less than or equal to 3. Now that final part that I've been talking about is your interval notation. So this one's going to look very similar to the last example we did. This goes from negative infinity all the way to 3. Remember, infinities are never included, so we have to use parentheses. And that positive 3, because it is an enclosed circle, you need to have a bracket on it. All right. For our next example, I threw it too far. Hang on. There it is. All right. We're distributing a negative. That's really similar to the last one. Let's do this. Goodbye. Let's do this bad boy. All right, so I've got 5 times a quantity n minus 1. It's greater than or equal to negative 5 times the quantity 5n plus 1. Now, you can divide both sides by 5. And the reason you can do that is because these coefficients right here are both 5. Problem is, you're still going to have a negative out front on this one. So my recommendation is just to distribute. So 5n minus 5 is greater than or equal to negative 25n minus 25. Now, several of you are going to freak out and go, hang on. You multiplied by a negative. You didn't flip your sign. You done goofed. Wrong. Bad teacher. Hang on. I didn't multiply or divide both sides. And maybe that's something I should have added up here. Just to make sure we're extra clear. Okay? So you only have to do that where you flip your inequality sign when you multiply or divide on both sides. All right, so now that I've done this, I can start moving some crap around. Let's add 5 on both sides. Let's add this 25 on both sides. and I get 30 n is greater than or equal to negative 20. All right, so this one, I kind of lied. It's going to be a little bit of a fraction. However, it's going to be a nice one, I promise. So I got to divide both sides by 30. Remember, I'm not dividing by a negative. I'm dividing a negative by a positive, so I don't have to flip inequalities. So I have n is greater than or equal to negative 20 over 30. And this reduces to negative 2/3. Now, negative 2/3 is going to suck a little trying to do it on the number line. It's not the end of the world if you're not perfect. I just kind of need you in the general vicinity. So here's negative 2/3. I need n to be greater than or equal to, hence the closed dot. So n being greater means I'm going that away. So this is the first one that we've had where it actually goes to the right on our number line. So when we're writing interval notation, the smallest number you're dealing with is that negative 2/3. And then you're going to positive infinity. Parentheses, bracket. Just an FYI, if anybody's looking at my infinity going, that's not how you do an infinity. I can't do this and make it all pretty and fancy without really concentrating. Like, have to stick my tongue out to concentrate. So it doesn't fly for me. And here's my final one. Awful, awful, horrible, horrible. Nobody really wants to deal with it. All right, so the reason I picked this one, and I'm actually going to crop out, now we'll leave the number line, is because it's hideous. But I want to refresh your knowledge on getting rid of the fractions, how to beautify it a little bit, if you will. So, before we start trying to actually find a number to multiply everything by, the one thing I do want to bring up is distributing first, so that way we can figure out what our common denominator is going to be. So I'm going to keep this left-hand side. That is greater than, and then because off the top of my head, I don't know what 17 times 5 is. Calculator. 17 times 5 is 85. Over 6 times 3 is 18. Here's my v, plus 17 over 6. So the one thing I would like to point out is 90 is, again, our largest denominator. So 90 goes into 90, we know that. But does 18 go into 90? So I'm going to go, what is 90 divided by 18? So I can check and see if it's going to give me a nice number. It does, and it's 5. Also going to check 6, just to make sure. And 90 divided by 6 equals 15. So we're okay to use 90 as our multiplication number to get rid of all of our hideous denominators. So I'm going to multiply this entire monstrosity by 90. All right? So I've got 90v minus 90's cancel, 281 is greater than. Now remember, we said 90 divided by 18 was 5, so I've got 85 times 5. I put my phone away too soon. So 85 times 5 is going to be 425. V plus, and then we said 90 divided by 6 was 15, so I've got 17 times 15, and that's going to give me that 255. All right. If you're looking at this going, hey, Mason, yeah, you can't skip that step where you did all your calculations. Like, I need to actually see that. Send me an email right away so I can make adjustments, in my videos, or I can go back during the Q&A sessions and explain like, oh, no, this is actually what I did. Okay? I don't want to confuse you. That's obviously not my goal. So, much nicer, still big numbers, but not the end of the world. So I'm going to move my 281 over here, and I'm going to move my 425V to this side. So I've got negative 425 plus 90. This is negative 335V, and that is greater than 255 plus 281, and that is 536. All right, divide both sides by 335. Now remember, I'm dividing by a negative. I have to flip my inequality sign. So I have V is less than negative 536 over 335. 536. Yeah, it doesn't go in. So it does reduce, which is nice, because that means V is less than negative 8/5. All right, so 8/5 is about 1.6 on the number line. So I'm going to scroll all the way back up here to my number line. I'm going to try and find me 1.6 on the negative, which is right here. All right, I'm going to go back down, take a peek, and it's V is less than it. So V is less than a negative 1.6. So I've got my inequality. Because it's less than, we're going to negative infinity. And because there is no equal sign, it means when we write our 8/5, instead of it being a bracket like we've done every other time, it's a parenthesis. That's all there is to inequalities.